What strange idea worked because people are weird? Wikipedia. It took a long time to become a high-quality source, but the desire of people to correct misinformation is so strong that once there was a high volume of information, the quality gradually surpassed that of traditional encyclopedias. It's amazing that it worked. I remember writing most of the article on Jackalope and a good chunk of the one on mosh pits back in 2003 when they were both stubs. There's a store here in Seattle, on Aurora Avenue, called the Purple Store. Everything they sell is purple. It's been there for years. Twitch Plays Pokemon. Twitch Plays Pokemon was beautiful. Taking forever to cut trees, spending 12 hours trying to cross that one ledge, making it all the way through Team Rocket's hideout, and beating Giovanni only to dig out before nabbing the Sylph Scope, Bird Jesus and Helix and all the other Pokemon. And that final successful Elite Four attempt after hours and hours of grinding against them. I remember feeling pretty sentimental when the whole thing ended. Spending like a whole day to get to Giovanni's gym because everyone kept falling off that small ledge at the turn was by far the most entertainment I've had on an interactive stream. Googling the number 241543903 will result in tons of images of people with their heads in freezers. Somebody out there had a dream, and now it's a reality. Googling 463-622-8756 results in the same, except this time it's washing machines. Where do you learn these things? More importantly, what other numbers are there we don't know yet? Heads in ovens. I bet it's heads in ovens. Selling products by ending the price with 99 cents instead of clean whole numbers. My mind automatically rounds it now. If it says 14.99 in my head, it's 15. They can't get inside my head. I learned in a marketing class that .99 is a no-no for high-end stores and restaurants. Items seem more luxurious with whole numbers. That's why you'll see prices at an expensive restaurant displayed like 24, 46, 12, etc. Howard Stern made a fortune talking to strippers on the radio where you can't see them. In a similar vein, one of the very first radio acts to hit the big time was a ventriloquist. It wasn't a guy doing many voices, it was one guy and his puppet, who may or may not have been present for broadcast. Honey, hey, look, a nest of flying thumbtacks, bet they're hiding something. This should be the only acceptable way to describe a bee. Grey Goose vodka wasn't selling well, so they just tripled the price and sales went through the roof. Everybody thought, it's more expensive, it must be better and really fancy. Also, Grey Goose made their bottles so skinny and tall so they would have to be placed on the top shelf. I knew a guy who was a DJ part-time. He did parties and birthdays and all, but for some reason barely any weddings, despite him mainly advertising for that. He doubled his price and instantly got way more customers. Houston Airport got a lot of complaints that it took baggage too long to get to the baggage claim and people had to wait a long time. They moved the baggage claim farther away from where you get off the airplane, and even though it took just as long, because people had to walk there, they didn't complain. It's why elevators tend to have shiny surfaces in the waiting areas. If you put a mirror by an elevator, people don't worry as much about wait times because they can look at themselves. We really are just monkeys in shoes. In a psychology course we were taking, we were tasked with finding a way to improve the listening ability, tested through a multiple-choice test after a lecture, of little kids. What worked? Blindfolding them, and letting them doodle as they listened. The doodles? Meaningless. However, they felt like they had freedom, and the only thing of slight interest was the teacher, so our class scored on average, I think, don't quote me on this, 5% higher than the other group's classes. Definitely works, keeps the brain active while limiting the stimuli that you're responding to. Kids with ADHD, for example, have been shown to be listening more intently when they are fidgeting. I found while in school that if I doodled on my paper with my ear to the professor, I retained info much better than droning on copying notes. People in other countries are often more willing to be nicer to foreigners than to their own kind. Traveling around a small city in China last year, my friends and I were looking for a hotel willing to hold on to our luggage for us while we did some sightseeing around the city for the day. This can be hit or miss in China. Some hotels are willing to do it, some aren't. Except that day, we got turned down by about 3 or 4 hotels before we started to worry that we wouldn't be able to do much sightseeing. Being fluent in Mandarin, we suddenly thought, What if we decided to do a psychological experiment and play the role of helpless foreigner and see if things went differently? Sure enough. The next hotel we visited walked right up to the front desk, and as soon as we started speaking English, the receptionist looked at her coworkers. I don't know what they are saying. My English is so bad. To my surprise, they pulled out a phone, called up their off-duty manager, and handed the phone to me. She spoke English, and so I explained to her what we wanted. She immediately said, "Yes, of course we can hold on to your luggage for you. Enjoy your time sightseeing." This experience alone speaks volumes. But I've seen plenty of other stuff in my travels to suggest that locals can be downright nasty to their own countrymen sometimes. And those same people often are willing to pull out all the stops to accommodate foreign visitors. I have no idea why this is. Probably due to the perceived helplessness of being a foreigner somewhere else leads to the locals being empathetic to your situation. If you are seen as a local or whatever, then most people will say you should have been responsible and had a plan beforehand. Electing a billionaire to fix the system that made him a billionaire. You know, I've never heard it put quite like this. A Carl Icelandic shark. The meat of the Greenland shark is poisonous when fresh, due to a high content of urea and trimethylamine oxide, but may be consumed after being processed. The traditional method is by gutting and beheading a Greenland or sleeper shark and placing it in a shallow hole dug in gravelly sand, with the now cleaned cavity resting on a small mound of sand. The shark is then covered with sand and gravel, and stones are placed on top of the sand in order to press the shark. In this way, the fluids are pressed out of the body. The shark ferments in this fashion for 6 to 12 weeks depending on the season. Following this curing period, the shark is then cut into strips and hung to dry for several months. During this drying period, a brown crust will develop, which is removed prior to cutting the shark into small pieces and serving. This resulted in what is almost unanimously the worst thing to ever come out of Iceland. I can only compare the taste to the smell of rancid cat piss. When I first started writing Android apps, I asked myself, what do people really want? Nudes is the obvious answer. But they already have lots of ways to send nudes. I'm not going to do better than any of 100 messaging apps on my own. They want to send nudes, and for there to be no trace of them to later end up on a shitty website. So I started working out an app where you could send pictures, on the basis that they could only be seen by the intended receivers. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized this just isn't a solvable problem. Sure, maybe I could override the screenshot functionality. They could still just take a picture of their phone's screen with some other camera. Can't be done, I says to myself. And I forget about it. The next year, Snapchat blew up. Turns out people don't need actual security. Out of sight, out of mind is nothing. But it's enough. That had not occurred to me. They need the appearance of security. The reality is apparently unimportant. A man decided he was going to try to get a house by making a series of trades that started with him trading one red paperclip. He succeeded in his quest to trade from a paperclip to a house. Selling used underwear out of vending machines. Where can I find one of these? Japan. Captain Cook noticed one day at port that sailors debarking from Spanish vessels weren't suffering from scurvy like sailors on British ships were. He couldn't figure it out, until one day he noticed the food rations being loaded onto the Spanish ships, and saw that sauerkraut were a part of their meal plans while at sea, whereas they were completely absent from British meal plans and diets in general. How do you get someone to eat sauerkraut while at sea if it is not part of their diet? You introduce it into the officers' meals only, of course. And then you have the officers dine next to the rest of the rank and file, where everyone can see the officers eating sauerkraut which they cannot have. From there, you wait for the rest of the sailors to ask why they can't have the new mystery food, and then you agree to compromise and allow all sailors to have sauerkraut once per week, as a reward for a diligent week's work. Sucking milk out of other animals and drinking it. Are you telling me someone sucked milk out of a cow then spat it out into a milk box? Yeah, someone. That guy who, fed up with littering in his neighborhood, put up a statue of Buddha on a traffic median as deterrence. Beyond reducing the litter, crime as a whole diminished, and local residents eventually built a whole shrine around the statue. Unboxing videos. Can't understand for the life of me why they're so popular. At least partly it's to satisfy the people who don't get packages in their own mail, so they can have the satisfaction of opening boxes by proxy. If I buy something that costs more than $100, it's nice to see an unboxing to know what to expect. Ever ordered something and it was bigger, smaller than you thought? Or didn't come with something you expected? Or needed an adapter or more parts? An unboxing will cover all of that in like 3 minutes. It's just nice for those of us who like to do a lot of research on what we buy. Giving your credit card info and address to a website online in hopes they send a product to your house in a short period of time. I still remember as a kid convincing my mom to let me use her card to make the family's first online purchase, a pinball game. She was so resistant and paranoid to put her info out there, and Dad was actually mad after, and was convinced we'd been scammed for a week until the game actually came. Clicker games. I have 141 hours on Adventure Capitalist, and got all of the achievements. Why is watching a meaningless number get bigger so addicting? Humans like to feel like they are accomplishing something without actually doing anything. I would know because I love Cookie Clicker. What strange idea worked because people are weird? Leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos like this one.